내가 없는 한국문학사라는 시에서 한마디로 여류쥐벼룩이라는 말로 여성 시인을 규정한 적이 있습니다. 제가 처음 시를 쓰기 시작한 1970년대 초반에는 여성 시인을 그냥 좀 높게 대접해 준다는 의미에서 여류답지 않게 본질적인 문제를 쓴다, 여류시 치고는 이색적이다 등등의 그 비평을 남성 평론가들이 했던 시대인데, 쥐벼룩이라고 불렀던 것은 별로 존재감도 없는 것이 귀찮게 물어대는 비천한 미물을 말하겠죠. 저도 무시를 많이 당하고 혹평도 받고 했지만 문학에 대한 열정이 있어서 크게 신경 쓰지는 않았어요. 계속 문제를 열정으로 돌파해 온 것입니다. 이 돌파하다, 그 말이 저에게 매우 소중했어요. 베네치아는 다 알다시피 정말 찬란한 물과 태양의 도시, 또 카이로도 역시 사막과 태양과 피라미드의 도시, 너무 거대하고 굉장하죠. 그 도시가 건드리고 있는 문화적 배후가 어마어마하다는 것을 느꼈고요. 인간의 공간 자체가 삶과 죽음의 서사를 기반으로 세워진 것 같다는 생각을 했어요. 베네치아, 카이로의 찬란한 태양, 대운하의 아름다움, 이런 것들이 어떤 우리의 창조적인 상상력에 그 많은 자극을 준 것 같습니다. 네, 베네치아 다녀와서 굉장히 어떤 그 상상력의 해방감, 이런 걸 느끼면서 시를 썼던 것 같아요. 이제 그 일기 쓰는 시기는 좀 이렇게 지났었고요. 지금은 이제 메모장, 그때그때 떠오르는 어떤 언어의 선광, 이런 것들을 채집하는 그런 수준이죠. 그 나중에 시를 쓸 때 이제 메모장을 보면 이렇게 좋은 말을 내가 썼었나? 막 혹시 나무책에서 읽은 거 아니야? 그런 의심이 들 정도로 놀라운 언어들이 들어있기도 하고. 네, 앞으로의 계획을 지금 잘 모르겠어요, 제가. 왜냐하면은 시인 늘 방황한다고 하잖아요. 시인에게는 내비게이션이 없기 때문에 항상 방황을 하죠. 방황을 하면서 이제 우발적으로 나에게 다가오는 시를 쓰는 건데요. 그래도 좀 작은 계획을 하나 가지고 있는데, 이 코로나가 좀 나아지면 정말 해외 여행을 좀 정말 가보고 싶어요. 그래서 한시바삐 이 팬데믹과 전쟁이 사라지고 인류의 모든 국경이, 모든 길이 활짝 열리기를 정말 기도하고 있습니다.
In our headlines on this Thursday, July 3rd, here in South Korea. President Lee Jae Myung holds a press conference earlier this morning to mark his first full month at the top office. And the Nat'l Assembly approves the president's nomination of Kim Min-seok for the post of Prime Minister. Meanwhile, heatwave advisories remain in place across the nation, with morning lows ranging from 23 to 28 degrees Celsius and daytime highs reaching up to 37 degrees. We start here on the National Front with a press conference held by the president to mark his first full month at the top office earlier on this Thursday. On the agenda were issues of much interest ranging from the economy to security to diplomacy. For more on this, our top office correspondent Yoon Jung-min is standing by live with details. Jung-min, it's good to have you on. I understand much ground was covered. Do start us off.
Right, Sunny. A host of issues were covered during the 2-hour-long press conference at the Yongbin-gwan Hall at the Blue House, under the title of Asked by the Press, Answers the Public. First, take a listen to what President Lee had to say, marking his 30th day in office.
지난 30일은 공난의 파도를 함께 건너고 계신 우리 국민 여러분의 간절한 열망을 매 순간 가슴에 새기며 하루하루 치열하게 달려온 시간이었습니다. 무엇보다 무너진 민생 회복에 전력을 다하는 중입니다.
For the remaining 4 years and 11 months, the new South Korean president vowed to make full efforts to stabilize the people's livelihoods and the cost of living. He promised to spare no effort in investing in AI, chips, renewable energy, and the culture industry for future growth.
Right, and Jung-min, what did he have to say with regard to his foreign policy?
Right, Sunny. So the president was mindful of trade negotiations with the U.S. as the Trump administration's deadline for tariff talks is less than a week away. He said one thing that he could say for sure was that it's not easy.
그래서 7월 8일까지 끝낼 수 있는지도 확언하기 어려워요. 지금 최선을 다하고 있습니다. 최선을 다하고 있고 또 쌍방의 모두에게 도움이 되는 그야말로 호혜적인 그런 결과를 만들어내야 하는데 아직까지도 쌍방이 정확하게 뭘 원하는지가 명확하게 정리되지는 못한 상태입니다.
He went on to say that his government is looking for topics in many different fields. On North Korea, the commander-in-chief vowed to improve relations with Pyongyang based on the South Korea-U.S. alliance, as well as the three-way cooperation with Japan, urging the importance of dialogue and communication.
근데 대화를 전면 단절하는 건 그건 정말 바보짓이죠. 미워도 얘기를 들어야 되거든요. 그리고 협상하고 정치나 외교에서는 감정을 배제해야 된다.
The town hall-style presser took place under the theme of Closer, Broader, and Anew, bringing the seats of the reporters closer to the president's desk without a podium. I should also note that the press conference took place unusually fast, just 30 days since President Lee Jae Myung took office, breaking a long tradition of South Korean presidents holding their pressers around the 100-day milestone. Back to you, Sunny.
All right, Jung-min, thank you for the latest from the president's first press conference held earlier this morning, that is, to mark 1 month at the top office. Moving on then, the Parliament has approved the president's nomination of Kim Min-seok for the post of Prime Minister. The approval was unilaterally pushed ahead by the ruling party amid a boycott by the main opposition party. Our political correspondent Shin Ha-young reports.
Four-term lawmaker Kim Min-seok has finally been given the green light to take the post of Prime Minister 29 days after being nominated by President Lee Jae Myung. This comes after the National Assembly approved his appointment on Thursday to the only cabinet post in South Korea that requires parliamentary approval. Of the 179 votes cast, 173 lawmakers voted in favor, 3 voted against, and 3 ballots were invalid. The ruling Democratic Party, which holds a majority in the 22nd National Assembly, pushed the motion through unilaterally amid a boycott by the main opposition People Power Party.
Given the current crisis, it's a shame that the PPP continues to obstruct the process. If the confirmation of the Prime Minister, who is supposed to lead the cabinet, is delayed any further, the public won't stand for it.
Ahead of the plenary session, the PPP demanded Kim's withdrawal, calling him an unqualified nominee, citing his failure to submit key documents, particularly those related to his wealth.
There hasn't been a prime minister nominee with this many issues before. Once again, we urge President Lee Jae Myung, it's not too late. Withdraw Kim Min-seok's nomination.
The presidential office welcomed the approval, saying that it paves the way for Prime Minister Kim to work closely with President Lee and help him run state affairs smoothly. Meanwhile, despite the standoff over Kim's appointment, the parliament passed a revision of the Commercial Act during Thursday's plenary session, following an agreement reached the previous day. Among 272 lawmakers present, 220 voted in favor, 29 voted against, and 23 abstained. This was one of the contentious bills the two sides have been clashing over. The DP had pushed a revision to the act back in March, but it was vetoed by the previous administration. The revision aims to add the word shareholders to the director's duties from just company. It also introduces the so-called 3% rule, which caps the voting rights of the largest shareholder and related parties at 3% when appointing audit committee members at listed companies. The rule is intended to prevent undue influence and abuse of control by majority shareholders. This marks the first passage of a bill related to the people's livelihoods and the first time the rival parties have reached a bipartisan agreement on legislation since President Lee took office. 신하영, Arirang News.
And President Lee Jae Myung has called for close cooperation between his administration and the country's 5 minor parties at the parliament. The comments were made over lunch at the presidential residence, where the president sat down with the leaderships of the Rebuilding Korea Party, Jinbo Party, Reform Party, Basic Income Party and the Social Democratic Party. The talks also covered the minor parties' thoughts regarding the tasks that they believe the new administration should seek to actively address, such as improving working conditions, reforming the prosecution as well as party systems, and pardoning politicians and labor activists deemed unfairly targeted by the former administration. Speaking to reporters, Senior Presidential Secretary for Political Affairs Woo Sang-ho added that the president intended to review the thoughts shared. Up next, we shed light on the Lee Jae Myung administration's economic initiatives over the past month and the plan ahead. Our Moon Ji-young has details.
President Lee has made it clear that his administration's top priority is the urgent recovery of people's livelihoods. This pressing focus on livelihoods stems from a challenging economic forecast that, as one expert recently highlighted, explains the government's strong emphasis on the critical need for immediate action.
Well, the growth rate this year is only expected to be 0.8% by the Bank of Korea, and a lot of international investment banks are predicting that it'll actually be worse. Some are predicting that the growth rate will only be 0.3%. The two main pillars of Korean economy is exports and domestic consumption, and both seems to be down very much this year.
President Lee has emphasized efforts to alleviate economic hardship, noting the swift activation of an emergency task force and the rapid allocation of a 30.5 trillion won supplementary budget, urging parliamentary approval to stimulate the economy. Beyond the immediate relief, a central theme of the president's address was an unwavering commitment to investing in future-oriented sectors. This includes advanced technology industries like AI and semiconductors, renewable energy initiatives, and the cultural sector. He articulated plans to prepare for a KOSPI 5000 era by advancing capital markets, aiming to channel capital into productive areas and enable citizens to invest in growing enterprises, thereby increasing national wealth. He also outlined a vision for balanced national development, seeking to overcome regional disparities and foster industrial collaboration between large corporations, SMEs, and startups. Regarding tariff talks with the U.S., President Lee said the government has made utmost efforts on tariff negotiations, but he can't say whether the talks could be concluded by July 8th, a deadline set by U.S. President Donald Trump. 문지영, Arirang News.
Vietnam has become the second country to seal a tariff deal with the U.S. ahead of next week's deadline. Our Kim Do-yeon reports.
The U.S. has announced its second major tariff deal since U.S. President Donald Trump announced an increase on tariffs for imported goods on April 2nd. Trump took to Truth Social on Wednesday where he called the agreement with Vietnam a great deal. According to his post, Vietnam will pay a 20% tariff on all goods shipped to the U.S. and a 40% tariff on transshipped products, which are goods Vietnam imports from China and then re-exports to America to dodge existing tariffs. He also wrote that in return, Vietnam will grant the U.S. total access to its markets, eliminating tariffs on American goods. Trump noted that SUVs have a good chance of success in the Vietnamese market. Deputy Treasury Secretary Michael Faulkender on CNBC described the deal as a huge win, adding that more could be announced before the July 9th deadline. He noted that for many countries, the sticking points aren't tariff levels, but non-tariff barriers which often block American products. If those come down, he said, it reshapes the calculus for U.S. trade. Faulkender also warned that there will be no extension beyond July 9th and that he anticipates an announcement on the tariffs imposed on countries that have not or do not strike a deal. This comes as South Korea has yet to strike an agreement. Despite Trade Minister Yeo Han-gu's trip to Washington last week, the Wall Street Journal reports a deal isn't close. Soar is seeking relief on U.S. tariffs targeting auto, steel, and aluminum, while U.S. negotiators have concerns over Korea's regulations on digital giants like Google and Coupang. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
The U.S. Defense Department has reaffirmed its ironclad alliance with South Korea. When asked on Wednesday whether Washington may shrink the size of its soldiers stationed here in South Korea, spokesperson Sean Parnell simply cited the Pentagon's policy against public discussion about U.S. military posture reviews. He did nonetheless emphasize Washington's security commitments to Seoul. Recent speculation about the fate of U.S. troops here follows an earlier Wall Street Journal report about a possible withdrawal of some 4,500 American soldiers from South Korea. And South Korea and Poland have completed negotiations for the potential sale of a second set of K2 tanks from Hyundai Rotem to Warsaw, paving the path for a more permanent foothold for the South Korean arms maker over in Europe. Our defense correspondent Kim Bo-kyung reports.
South Korea's Hyundai Rotem has completed negotiations over a deal to export additional K2 tanks to Poland, according to the State Arms Procurement Agency on Wednesday. Though the specific size of the contract is yet to be disclosed, it is widely expected to be a deal worth around $6.5 billion, a little less than 9 trillion Korean won. This marks the first large-scale arms export deal completed under the new Lee Jae Myung administration, and also it will be Seoul's largest single arms export contract if the figure above is confirmed. The Defense Acquisition Program Administration said Seoul and Warsaw are currently coordinating to arrange the signing ceremony. With Russia's invasion of Ukraine, there has been a defense spending push in Poland. After signing a framework contract in July 2022, Warsaw signed a series of deals with South Korean defense companies later that year to acquire K2 tanks, K9 self-propelled howitzers, Fa-50 light attack aircraft, and the K239 Chunmoo multiple launch rocket system. Following the first phase contract, second phase deals were made for the K9 howitzers in 2023 and Chunmoo MLRS in 2024. Though the second phase contract for the K2 tanks was expected to be signed around the same time as other weapon systems, negotiations took longer, only to be settled this year. Industry sources say with production facilities to be established in Poland, 117 units out of 180 K2 tanks will be produced by Hyundai Rotem. while the rest will be locally made by Warsaw's state-owned Polish armaments group PGZ. An expert says this deal could further build momentum for Korea's defense industry, especially as NATO members are now committed to raising defense spending to 5% of GDP.
They has no defense industry over the 7 decades. So Rang military and K defense industry supported them to have their own self-defense capability in the long term, in the end, rather than U.S. weapon system who push country to buy only a weapon but not a copyright system or supporting system.
While leveraging strong defense capabilities and cost-effective production, Korea aims to boost defense export momentum in Europe. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
In other news, quite a number of people made their way to emergency rooms nationwide on Wednesday amid the blistering heat wave here in South Korea that continues today. Our An Sung-jin covers the scorching temperatures here.
South Korea remains in the grip of a heat wave. According to the Korea Meteorological Administration, heat wave advisories were issued across the country on Thursday, with morning lows ranging from 23 to 28 degrees and the daytime high reaching up to 37 degrees in some areas. As hot and humid conditions persist, the feel-like temperatures are expected to hover above 33 degrees in most parts of the country. With temperatures remaining over 25 degrees throughout the night as well, the capital's Seoul has continued to see tropical nights since the first one of the year on June 29th. As the country continues to suffer, the Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency stated that the number of those reported with heat-related illnesses reached 524 from May 15th till the 1st of July. The figure is 1.34 times more than the same period from last year. Health authorities are urging the public to take precautions by making sure to rest in cool environments and limit outdoor activities. Meanwhile, the rainy season has come to an early end. The KMA has announced that the monsoon season has officially ended on Jeju Island and in the southern regions, marking one of the earliest on record. As the North Pacific high air pressure system pushed the monsoon stationary front northwest, Jeju left the effective range on June 26th, and the southern regions have been out of the area of monsoon influence since Tuesday. For Jeju, it has been the earliest monsoon season ending since nationwide weather monitoring began in 1973, while for southern areas, it marked the second earliest. In terms of the monsoon period, both Jeju and the southern regions were the second shortest on record, lasting 15 and 13 days consecutively. However, the KMA said it's still too early to declare the end of the monsoon season in other regions, as a weakened stationary front near North Korea may temporarily affect the area. Rain is forecast for this week, though precipitation is expected to remain light. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, the Korea Baseball Organization has set a historic milestone. Over 7 million spectators made their way to stadiums in the first half of the baseball season for the first time since the organization's inception back in the year 1982. Also, almost half of the matches were sold out. The average per-game attendance this season currently stands at over 17,000, up 17% on year. Now, should this trend continue, the organization is on track to surpass 10 million spectators this season for the second straight year. And the National Museum of Korea welcomed more than 2.7 million visitors during the first half of this year, its largest figure in 2 decades. Now, it's also an on-year surge of over 64%. The number of foreign visitors also hit an all-time high during this period at almost 100,000. The museum is linking this trend to rising global interest in Korean culture, fueled by Korean content such as K-pop and K-dramas.
This is The World Now, bringing you the latest stories from around the globe. In the United States, in the trial of music mogul Sean Diddy Combs, the judge has upheld his convictions on lesser prostitution charges while clearing him of charges on racketeering, conspiracy, and sex trafficking, charges that could have put the hip-hop figure behind bars for life. A Manhattan federal court jury found Combs guilty on 2 counts under the Mann Act, transporting individuals for prostitution. This comes after a 7-week trial involving testimony from former partners Cassie Ventura, known as Cassie, and Jane, as well as other witnesses. However, Combs was acquitted on the 3 most serious charges, including racketeering conspiracy and 2 counts of sex trafficking, removing the threat of a potential life sentence. Combs bowed his head in the courtroom and said, "I'll be home soon," as supporters celebrated the partial verdict. However, he was denied bail ahead of sentencing, with the judge citing evidence of violence in personal relationships. Sentencing will take place later this year, but Combs likely faces several years behind bars. Exiled Tibetan spiritual leader the Dalai Lama has announced during his 90th birthday week that there will indeed be a successor after his death, directly challenging Beijing's claim that only it can control the process. Speaking in Dharamshala, India on Wednesday, the Dalai Lama affirmed that the institution of the Dalai Lama will continue and that the Khaden Phodrang Trust, alongside Tibetan Buddhist leaders, will hold sole authority to identify his reincarnation. He emphasized that his successor will likely be born outside China, underscoring his rejection of any candidate chosen under Beijing's system. The decision resolves long-standing uncertainty and safeguards against China's claims of authority over Tibetan spiritual succession. He outlined that the trust, founded in 2011 and governed by Tibetan exiles, will consult senior monks and follow traditional procedures, possibly even nominating a living successor during his lifetime. However, China asserts its own legal right to oversee the Dalai Lama's reincarnation and asserts that it would need to be approved by Beijing. Tech giant Microsoft announced on Wednesday that it will cut nearly 4% of its workforce, approximately 9,000 jobs, as part of a strategic shift to accelerate investments in artificial intelligence infrastructure. In a statement to investors, the company confirmed the layoffs would span multiple divisions, including global sales and marketing teams. This is Microsoft's 3rd major round of cuts this year, following approximately 6,000 layoffs in May and additional reductions in June, which have brought the total job losses for 2025 to more than 15,000. Microsoft plans an $80 billion capital expenditure for the fiscal year in support of its AI ambitions. In the U.S. state of Arizona, members of the Tohono O'odham Nation have begun their annual sacred soar fruit harvest, known as Bahidaj, marking the start of the new year. The ritual takes place over several weeks in late June to early July, when the ruby red fruit ripens atop the towering saguaro cactus that can reach 12 meters tall. The fruits, once harvested, are boiled into syrup, and some are fermented into wine, which is used for a rain ceremony. These ceremonies affirm ancestral bonds, the relationship with natural resources, and the resilience of the Native Americans' identity. Choi Ji-hee, Arirang News.
The heat is causing sleepless nights. There are many areas which have suffered from tropical nights, especially around the East Coast and inland areas. Arirang reached 38.3 degrees Celsius yesterday, recording the highest temperature this year. And Gangneung has had 2 super tropical nights in a row already, with nighttime temperatures above 30 degrees. Under heat wave warnings and advisories in most parts of the country, temperatures in Seoul soared up to 32 degrees and 37 degrees in Arirang during the day today. It will get hotter, with Seoul rising up to 34 degrees in the middle of next week. Tomorrow morning will start warm across the country at around 25 degrees. Daily highs will move up to 31 degrees in Seoul, 32 degrees in Chuncheon and Jeju. About 5 to 20 millimeters of rain is expected in Incheon, northern parts of Gyeonggi-do province, and western parts of Gangwon-do province tomorrow. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. As always, thank you for watching.
Set the facts straight. Get Korea right. K-culture is sweeping the globe. K-pop, K-drama, K-movie, K-food, and even K-beauty. Korean cultural content is gaining more and more fans worldwide. It's indeed the golden age of K-culture. But with this growing interest comes an increase in misinformation about Korea. There's so much inaccurate information out there. Even AI can sometimes get it wrong. So, we must set things straight and correct all the misinformation. So here's the plan. The Voluntary Agency Network of Korea, VANK, and Arirang TV present the Get Korea Right project. Our goal is to provide accurate information on important keywords that come to mind when we think of Korea. Blatant errors and false claims that distort history. It's time to set the record straight, sharing the true history and culture of Korea while raising the national brand. Let's get started with Get Korea Right. Are you ready to join?
Arirang TV is conducting an overseas TV viewer survey to provide you with a better global broadcast service. Share your valuable feedback on the Arirang TV website www.arirang.com or mobile application. Survey participants will be selected at random to receive special gifts. 2025 Arirang Overseas TV Viewer Survey. We look forward to hearing from you.
Held its first debate over the weekend.
The economy is expected to expand 2.5% this year.
Boosting Korea's ties with its global partners on the sidelines of the Status UN summit.
A massive drone attack on Ukraine overnight on Monday and Tuesday.
Arirang.
President Lee Jae Myung holds his first press conference earlier on this Thursday morning to mark his first 1 month at the top office. With more on Press Perspective today. Hello and welcome to Thursday's edition of Press Perspective. It's July 3rd here in Seoul. I'm Min Seok. The Lee Jae Myung administration has marked its first full month at the top office, and in our panel session today, we touch upon this reality and more. For this, I have Celio Ferretti with French daily Le Croix here in the studio. Celio, welcome.
Glad to be here.
I also have our freelance journalist Yang Chen-hao from Taiwan, based here in Seoul. Welcome back, Chen-hao.
Thanks for having me.
Right, Celia, we will begin with you. Let's start off then with a few words about the president's public address to mark his first full month at the top office. What was the gist of his message?
To make it simple, Korea is back on track and ready to work, and there is a lot of work to do. President Lee Jae Myung said in his press conference this morning at the Blue House that Korean democracy is back after 6 months of long-lasting political crisis and instability. And during this press conference, Lee Jae Myung addressed mentioning his key policies that he's trying to implement these days for the last months and the months to come. First and foremost, focus on the economy. That is crucial right now. President Lee Jae Myung wants to improve the livelihood of Korean, and that comes with a reform on the housing market that is currently trying to implement. And Lee Jae Myung also wants to reduce citizens' expenses that comes through the debt relief program that is trying to promote, and also the stipend that will soon probably will come into Korean bank accounts. Still on the economy, Lee Jae Myung wants to promote a tech-based growth, bolstering the high-tech and AI industries, still working toward this ambitious goal of reaching 5,000 points on the KOSPI, the Korean Financial Index. His administration is pushing a 14 billion stimulus package to boost weak domestic demand and economy instability, to fight economic instability. And with U.S. tariff looming around, Lee Jae Myung acknowledged that the negotiations with Washington have been tough and long and may not conclude before the 8th of July deadline. There will be some more work to be done on that front. And as mentioned before, Lee Jae Myung boasts about democracy being back on track, and he's working to improve it. And to him, it means a judicial system reform that he talked extensively today at the press conference, a reform that should separate investigative and prosecution powers. A quite divisive reform, but he hoped to implement it before Chuseok with the help of the Nat'l Assembly, from which he has the majority with his party. And also mentioning North Korea, Lee Jae Myung warned that rising tension have real economic consequences on Korea, despite the South Korea's strong military force. He stressed that diplomacy must remain open. They should have a dialogue between North and South, and it would be foolish to shut off all dialogue. For Lee Jae Myung, peace is not just about security, it's also a way to promote economic recovery in the border region, but also in the region, in the Asia-Pacific region at all.
Right. And staying with his press conference, Chen-hao, what were some of your takeaways from his Q&A session with members of the media here?
Many people are paying attention to the press conference today, and you can see that President Lee answered the journalist question one by one. Domestically, what has drawn the most attention is his emphasis on the current real estate control measures. He said that this is merely an appetizer. That means with more policy will come in the future. Also, President Lee also stated that the importance of prosecutorial reform. Celio just mentioned that, claiming the new government will continue to push for the separation of investigative and prosecutorial powers, which President Moon, he's supposed to do that, but it's not fully successful. And also he has mentioned that he will meet the opposition party leaders more frequently, and he will take take on more responsibility when it comes to compromise and unity. And I need to really say something about the press conference today, because I've been here covering the stories in South Korea for 13 years. This is the best press conference I've ever seen, because you can see that it is really open, and then President Lee is really trying to answer questions as much as possible, and the chances are being provided. So I hope this kind of chances will happen more and more, and making media asking more tough questions and trying to make President Lee answer and to show his plans, what he's going to do in the future. And also the media can supervise on the government, on the authority. I think this is a very good way.
Right. Now, so the president has been at the top office for a month right now. I suppose it might be too early to ask, but based on that time frame, how is the president's leadership style being perceived by the public here, do you think?
So it's been 1 month since President Lee took office, and many people are still having many, I can say it's expectation on the new government and also President Lee himself. After the martial law crisis, South Korea has been facing many challenges, including the erosion of social justice and economic stagnation. The public is hoping for someone who can actually address these issues. And we can always say that the first 3 months will be the honeymoon period of a newly elected president. And the situation of Lee Jae Myung is very similar to former President Moon Jae-in, since they took office immediately the next day after they were being elected. That means that there won't be any presidential transition committee. The new government have no time to prepare and might need to make some urgent decisions immediately. And during this period, we can also see that the new government and the ruling party, the Democratic Party, still have their own foreign positions, such as calling for a new supplementary emergency budget and the distribution of the relief bonds. However, over the past month, we can see that President Lee has continued to meet with opposition party leaders, trying to listen to any kinds of different opinions and maintaining a humble stance. Let's take a look at the weekly poll conducted by Real Meter. Over the past 3 weeks, President Lee's approval ratings has been remaining steady between 58 to 59%, which is a very high level. As for party support, the Democratic Party of Korea stands at 50.6%, while the People Power Party is at around 30%. At present, public opinion in South Korea remains hopeful and kind of positive toward the new government and the ruling party.
Right, so that is the sentiment of the people here. That being said, Celio, how is the international media perhaps framing the president's handling of state affairs thus far?
I would say it's quite optimistic, as my colleague Chen Hao mentioned. Domestically, Lee Jae Myung has around 60% good opinion, favorable opinion on his work so far for the first month, and it's quite shared also in international media. I think his administration has a really good communication with pictures, with a lot of communication coming at the G7, talking with the other leaders. Also, his press relations are really well done. My colleague Chen Hao underlined the good effect of a press conference today. So I think just on the image itself, it's already benefiting Lee Jae Myung administration, but also in his policies, what is noticed in the international media is this bipartisan approach that he has. And he mentioned it again today at the press conference. He wants to reach a consensus without making like a too hard compromise on his goal. He knows where he wants to go, but he's willing to listen to everyone in the room to work towards better united Korea between the two parties that have been fighting a lot for the last 6 months. And he has a sort of attitude of putting himself above the fray, above the battle, to really have this almost distant position, working for Korea and not necessarily for the party. And I think that is pretty well perceived both domestically and abroad in international media, international communities. He said that he will accept criticism from anyone as long as it's constructive and it will help to make Korea a better place, and that is quite appreciated. He's also seeking peace with the North, or at least a better discussion, dialogue with the North. And his move to shut down the speaker campaign at the borders has been really well perceived in international media, seeing really after 2.5 years of really increasing tension on the peninsula at the borders with the trash balloon, the campaign speakers, the firing of missile, this move to maybe shut down the speakers and make a room for negotiation and make a room for diplomacy has been really well perceived. And hopefully for the international media, they want to see more of that, maybe a more dialogue between the two, and we'll see if Lee Jae Myung can really achieve that goal.
Right. And with regard to his policies, Chen Hao, what public pledge that the president has already put into action straight after coming into the top office would you like to highlight, and why?
There are two things. One is calling for the supplementary emergency budget, and another is strengthening the regulations of the real estate, as I mentioned in the beginning. Let me focus on the emergency budget this time. During his presidential campaign, President Lee, Mr. Lee repeatedly emphasized the need for the budget as a method to revitalize, to boost the economy. Indeed, before the election, the Korea National Assembly has already passed one time the supplementary emergency budget once in the beginning of May. And now President Lee is calling the National Assembly to pass another edition of the new emergency budget. And the main issue this time is to issue the general consumer coupons to all of the citizens in South Korea. According to the proposal from the new government, each person will be paid, will receive from around 150,000 to 500,000 won based on their income levels. We all know that South Korea has been struggling with weak domestic demand over the past decades. Even prices show an upward trend again last month. For example, when I went to the supermarket doing shopping last week, I've already noticed that the prices of eggs and vegetables are going up again. And this will undoubtedly impact the ordinary citizens, and even the food service industry, such as restaurants. And so we'll need to see if the consuming coupon can really play a positive role on boosting the consumer spending. And at the same time, when the government expands the spending, it means that the fiscal burden will become heavier in the same time. Current statistics show that the two supplementary budget will increase South Korea's debts by 923.5 trillion won. I believe the government also needs to explain how it plans to address this debt going forward.
Right. And staying with this, Celia, earlier you mentioned about how the president's decision to turn off the loudspeaker broadcasts along the border into North Korea was a positive move, as shared by the foreign media. Keeping with that, what other decisions do you suppose were quite notable during the first 1 month at the top office by the president?
I think also in international media, what really brought attention is the nomination of the maybe future Labour Minister, Mr. Kim Yong-hun. This decision, which is quite extraordinary, it's really uncommon both in South Korea but everywhere in the world, to nominate someone from the civil society as such a high position as Labour Minister, has been really well appreciated and also raised some question in international media as well as Korean media. And I think it was really a good move from Lee Jae Myung administration, because he, coming from the Democratic Party, he has a line to help and work with the working class. And also his campaign has been quite light on it, as he wanted to have more of a centrist figure to appeal to every voters. this decision to nominate someone from a railroad worker as a labor minister, someone from the KCTU, the Korean Union, sent a good signal for this working class voters, for the people attached to these values of the Democratic Party. So I think just in the communication, in the image, in the strategy, it's a good move. But also it's quite interesting to see he really wants to, and you can see it in all of his administrative cabinet, he really wants to put people at position where they know what they will be doing. Having someone from the working class at the labor ministry is smart because they will know how to tackle these issues. Having someone from Naver or someone from LG, as we've seen in all the cabinets, is smart because it's people that know what they will be doing. And I think people here domestically, they appreciate that because they will feel they are governed by people that will be on their level, that will know how to talk to the other industries, to the unions, to the workers, to everyone. So I think that is quite a smart move from the administration. And I would say another point that my colleague Chen Hao mentioned is the tackling of the housing crisis right away. It's been only a month he's in office and he's already working with this deep, sensitive issue that has been plaguing Korea for decades now, the housing crisis, especially in the metropolitan area. And I think it's also sent a good signal that he's not afraid to tackle the real issue, the hard ones. We'll see how that will work out in the coming months and years even. Maybe it will work, maybe it will not work, but at least he's showing to the people in Korea that he's not afraid to go hard on the biggest issues.
Right. Meanwhile, Sharon, back on the cabinet situation, that is, we have quite a number of names shared by the president for his cabinet. What more can you tell us about the nominations being made? And also, what do his nominations tell you about the policies that he is seeking going forward?
The most impressive one is, for me, is just the same as Celio, the labor minister, Kim Yong-hoon, he was a railway driver, and he was the former leader of the Korean Confederation of Trade Unions, so-called Minju-Nochong. This really makes me and many other journalists very surprised because we can see that under conservative regime, the administration, the government has typically been very unfriendly to those members of labor unions, especially for Minju-Nochong. And even during Moon Jae-in's presidency, during President Moon's term, the KCTU strongly demanded an increase in the minimum wage and also the improvements to working conditions, which sometimes even led to clashes with the government. But now there is finally a minister who coming from the labor union. I think it is quite symbolic. I think it shows that the President Lee Jae Myung administration will be very likely to take a more labor union friendly stance moving forward and show the genuine commitment to addressing the labor rights issues. Furthermore, the experienced DP lawmaker An Gyu-baek is named as the Minister of Defense. Mr. An becomes the very first civilian defense minister since 1961. Till Yoon Suk-yeol's term, all of the defense ministers were from the military, such as generals. But as you can see, the former minister Kim Yong-hyun, who is the President Yoon's upperclassmate and from high school, become the one who suggests declaring martial law, ultimately pushed the whole country into huge crisis. I believe President Lee Jae Myung is very cautious about this matter, and that is probably the reason that he decided not to appoint another military officer as defense minister.
Right. Meanwhile, moving from defense to diplomacy, Celia, on that front, the diplomatic front, the key phrase with regard to the Lee Jae Myung administration, according to some foreign media, is strategic patience. Now, keeping in mind the current geopolitical scenario, how feasible is such a strategy, do you think?
That's right. Strategic patience is the word. And he reaffirmed it today in his press conference, seeking better ties with US, China, Japan, and even Russia. On the paper, the strategy makes sense. You want to create a space for diplomacy, a space for discussion and negotiation, especially in a region like here that sees a confrontation between China and the US. But you know the old proverb describing Korea as a shrimp between two whales, and when the whale fights, the shrimp back gets broken. Well, Korean is not a shrimp anymore, but still is in between two whales, and it really wants to avoid any confrontation that will risk to hurt the Korean economy, the Korean people, the Korean defense industry. So for President Lee, walking this tightrope might be a bit difficult because we are in a time where we need to pick a side, and especially the other countries are pressuring everyone to pick a side, to be on the side of the US, to be on the side of China. And it poses a fair share of dilemma. We can even see it these days. For example, Korea is now pondering whether the president should visit China for the commemoration of the end of the Second World War. No official invitation has been sent already, but still it is a question because last time a Korean leader went there, President Park Geun-hye was there, it caused a fair share of trouble back then. So Korea wants to avoid too much trouble, but at the same time, Korea wants to get better relation with China. So this kind of dilemma will only keep appearing again and again, and it will require Lee Jae Myung to be very cautious in his approach to diplomacy to work with that, especially facing Trump that is quite unpredictable, especially when it comes to North Korea. Lee Jae Myung wants to create better dialogue with the North, but Trump maybe wants to meet again Kim Jong-un. We won't know what the strategy of the US is. Maybe they want to push for a summit again really fast that would sideline Korea. So there is a lot of cautious to have. We'll see all of that unfold, but it will be very interesting to watch.
Right, for sure, which is now why quite a number of foreign media is talking about strategic patience with regard to South Korea's foreign policy based on, of course, as you mentioned earlier on last time that we talked on pragmatic diplomacy.
Exactly.
All right, I'm afraid that's all the time. Celia, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts. Yang Chen, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
Right, well, that brings us to the end of this edition of Press Perspective. We return same time tomorrow with another panel session, so do join us then.